Our title is Understanding Psychosis, so I guess this is kind of hopefully a kind of conceptual frame for the day. Not that you have to agree with it all, of course, because the whole point is it's a contested area, and people understand different things by the terms psychosis and indeed schizophrenia. This is where I'm from, Canterbury Christ Church University, the Salomons Institute for Applied Psychology. So, yeah, understanding psychosis and schizophrenia. A conceptual frame that I'm kind of trying to present a bit is, I guess, my personal understanding of what this thing is, psychosis that we talk about, or what one might mean when one uses that word. It's also the conceptual frame given in this document, which I edited, that some of you may have come across, Understanding Psychosis and Schizophrenia from the British Psychological Society. It's a public information report, one of a series. There's one on bipolar experiences, and there's one coming out on the experiences we call depression. There's a big issue to be had about all the titles, because they're all like psychiatric diagnoses, but if you don't use them in the title, nobody's ever going to find them on Google. So, you know, it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Anyway, we had lots of discussions about the title. These are all the people that were involved, a lot of academics, a lot of researchers in psychosis, a lot of people who personally experienced psychosis, and indeed some of people who are both. So about 1 in 4 of the contributors had personal experience of psychosis. And just before I go on to the conceptual framework, that's how you can get hold of a copy. It's free. You can download it free from that link, understandingpsychosis.net, and you can also get a free hard copy by emailing that email address there. I can put that up at the end if you like. Okay, so what is this thing called psychosis? If you get labelled with psychosis and the experiences carry on for a while, you may get the label of schizophrenia may be applied to you. They're often used interchangeably. So what are these experiences? I mean, a lot of you in this room will know this. Hearing voices, believing things others find strange, or acting in ways that others find strange, or appearing out of touch with reality. So we were keen in our document not to impose a particular psychiatric framework of understanding by using psychiatric terminology for these things. We wanted to express them as experiences. But of course, hearing voices gets called in mental health services hallucinations. Believing things other people find strange gets called delusions, sometimes paranoia, depending on what the belief is. And appearing out of touch with reality is psychosis or florid psychosis. Okay, so just to say that these labels are just labels. They're not... the word diagnosis, my personal view is it's a bit misleading, because in general medicine, you expect a diagnosis to tell you something about the cause. That's kind of the part of the meaning of the word in our culture. But yet in mental health, they're not. They're just classifications, labels. There's an argument about whether there's a place for those. There's pros and cons. But the point is they don't tell you anything about cause. They are just a way of describing or re-describing something that the person has described to the clinician. So this is a picture of a clinician suggesting a diagnosis or a label, and I'm not sure that the young person concerned is too keen on it. So it's a circular. How we define these things are circular. So why does my son hear voices? Because he has schizophrenia. How do you know? Because he hears voices. So the whole thing is circular. It's not an explanation. Okay, so what else do we say? The experiences are quite common. About 1 in 10 of us will hear voices, for example. They're often a response to things that happen in people's lives, either the general circumstances of our lives or specific things that happen. There's no clear dividing line between what we call normal experiences and psychotic experiences. And calling them symptoms of mental illness is just one way of talking about them. It may be helpful in some contexts, it may be unhelpful in other contexts, but it's not like the truth, the only way of seeing it. And I think in a way that's what we're trying to do, is to open up, and that's what today is about as well, open up these things for discussion and debate, and take as a starting point that people have these experiences, but how we understand them and how best to help is controversial and contested, and different people have different ideas, and indeed it may, as Charlie was saying, it may be different for different people, and people may not fit into a particular label with a particular intervention associated with it. So yes, some people find it useful to think of themselves as having an illness. In our current society, it's one of the only ways often open to people to get help, for example, or to get support, in financial support. So it's important, but it's not the only way of thinking about it. And others may prefer to think of their problems, for example, as part of their personality. Sometimes gets them into trouble, but they wouldn't want to be without. Yeah, and this is kind of our central message, if you like. Professionals shouldn't insist that people accept any one particular framework of understanding, because traditionally mental health services, I mean, it's almost kind of what it says on the tin. You know, this is an issue with your mental health. You are mentally ill, and it's often not presented as, might that be a helpful way to think about it? It's more, this is what's happening, and that's really what we're challenging. It's kind of similar to, a lot of you will probably be familiar with the Hearing Voices Network. I think it's similar to the approach advocated by them, in the sense that an acceptance that people have experiences, but there are a number of different explanations of those, and different people will have different explanations, and that's okay. Nobody can say which is true and which is false. That's a very different starting point from standard mental health services. So yeah, the reason someone might experience these things is the same reasons that you might experience any other thing or behave in a certain way. So this is just an example. I call it the gin and tonic example. It's probably a bit early for that. But anyway, this woman is laughing far too loud, okay? The question is, why? Let's have a diagnosis. What's causing her to laugh too loud? Well, you could come up with a sociological explanation. It's their first date. That's in the script for a first date, right? You're very attentive and you laugh at the person's jokes. Okay, that's the sociological explanation. You could have a psychological explanation. She really likes him. Okay, so that's why she's laughing too loud at his jokes, or very, very. I mean, somebody said when I did this another time, who's to judge what's too loud? And that is another issue. It's a good point. But anyway, assuming that we agree that she's laughing too loud, could be a psychological explanation. It could be a chemical explanation. This, you see the drink? It's her 6th gin and tonic, right? So chemically, there's something going on that's making it more likely that she's going to be laughing too loud. So I don't know if can you see the point? The point is, we don't know how much of those different things is contributing to that particular behaviour on that occasion. And in fact, it's probably a little bit of everything in different proportions, and who's to say, really? It's just the same with experiences that we call psychosis. You may be familiar with this metaphor, the bucket metaphor for stress. Basically, the idea is that we experience a breakdown when our bucket runs over, and the bucket gets filled up with stressful stuff, basically. So in this case, work or study, friends, difficulties in relationships with friends, and environment, the things that are happening all around. So this person's bucket is full up and running over. So the point is here, different people have different buckets. It's buckets for causes, if you like. So, and it's just the same with psychosis. So in Ethan's case, how do you like my artwork? Sorry about that. In Ethan's case, he's had one event that's happened to him, which has been so difficult that it has led to him experiencing psychosis. There's probably no other risk factors or anything. It's just that event, probably. So, I mean, who can tell? But I'm assuming that this is the person's own personal account of what might have contributed to their difficulties. So for him, it's just that. For Molly, she's in very difficult circumstances, and some difficult things have happened recently. She's got a certain psychological makeup and a certain biological makeup, and they're kind of roughly equal, possibly. And then with Caitlin, she's got a biological makeup that might make her predisposed to having psychotic experiences, but she wouldn't have them if other things didn't happen as well, so she's also in difficult circumstances. So the point is, different things for different people, just like with the gin and tonic example, and also who's to say what's contributing in what proportions. The only way, and this is one of the things we say in the report, the only way to really find out is for clinicians to sit down with the person and talk to them and find out what they think and work out together what might be contributing and therefore what might help. So in terms of what might help, obviously, I mean, it's stretching the metaphor probably a bit much, but you can put taps in the bucket at different places. So, you know, in terms of relieving the pressure, relieving the stress, and having that conversation about what might be contributing for you might give you a clue where to put your own particular taps, and they will be different for each person. So it's very different from the you have X, the treatment is Y kind of approach. Okay, just to finish what we say in the report, important to acknowledge that there is racism in services. Black people are not only more likely to be labelled with schizophrenia, they also very much get a worse deal often in services, for example, being on the receiving end of coercion. Statistically, that is the case, and we have to acknowledge that. Many people find medication helpful. We're not anti-medication. It's more like, if it works for you, fine, but it's not like a treatment for your disorder. And there's no evidence that it corrects an underlying biological abnormality. Just going back to services, and I suppose it's relating to what you were saying, Charlie, it's vital that services offer people the chance to talk about their experiences. People think out there, I don't know if you've come across this, but people think that if you see mental health services, and particularly if you go into hospital, that's what you get. You get somebody listening to you. And as probably a lot of people in this room will be able to say, that doesn't always happen. In fact, it's sadly relatively rare. And the UK needs to invest in prevention. And we're not talking about, finding people who might possibly develop psychosis later and giving them drugs, which is sometimes what it comes down to. It's much more like, if we know the kinds of things in our society that lead people to suffer and specifically make people more likely to experience distressing psychosis, then we can do things that, we can address those issues. Things like child abuse. I mean, parenting would be parenting interventions. It's a very different approach to prevention from the standard one. Just to say, this is a really exciting development, specifically with regard to children and young people. So today's topic, we are producing a short version, it's essentially a leaflet presenting these same ideas but aimed at children and young people who themselves experience psychosis. It's in development. This is what it looks like. It will hopefully be published this year sometime. Jeff sitting there has taken the lead on this project. It's been amazing. Jeff is from Bright, who is the organisation that have joined together with the BPS, British Psychological Society, to bring out this new leaflet. They also run a project called Chameleon, which is about improving child and adolescent wards in services. This is a bit just to show you what it looks like, a bit from the inside. I don't know if you can read that, but it's similar things to what I've been saying today, but hopefully presented in a succinct version in a format that is acceptable and even appealing for young people. And there's also a bit, going back to the thing about everybody's different, a bit at the end about making it personal and space for people to think about what might have contributed in their particular case, and therefore what might help.